Smartphones are kind of a nightmare for privacy. One of the things that can make it a little bit better is to use a custom Android ROM that doesn't have Google Apps in it. But that raises the question, how do you get a phone with a custom Android ROM on it? One of the ways to do that is to get a phone that can install a custom Android ROM and then manually do the install process. That's annoying for a couple of reasons though. First, it's hard to figure out which phones can support a custom Android ROM. Frequently, there are phones that have one version that's a locked version, commonly for Verizon, and then have another completely identical version except for the exact model number that can support a custom ROM. It is an unlocked bootloader device. So you can do that, but it takes quite a bit of work. And when there's something that you'd like to do that would normally take quite a bit of work, one convenient thing to do is to get someone else to do the work for you. So it'd be nice to be able to buy a phone with a custom ROM without Google applications on it pre-installed. And there's a couple of options for doing this, but not very many. One of the options is to have this guy, Rob Braxman. Let's see if we can find Rob Braxman here. This guy, Rob Braxman, have him do it for you. He styles himself the internet privacy guy. He has a YouTube channel as well as doing videos on some other platforms. And he spends a lot of time talking in detail about all the privacy threats that you have to worry about in modern computing. And I don't agree with him on all of the points that he makes, but overall he provides a pretty good explanation of what's going on, and he's not completely clueless. He understands what he's doing. So he offers the service of providing pre-installed phones with these Google-free Android custom ROMs on them. So let's take a quick look at what he has here. Here's his online store. I don't know about this user interface, but then my video layout today is sort of sketchy with this black spot, so I can't complain too much about user interfaces. In any case, he's got some router stuff with VPN support. Same thing for Raspberry Pi, a Tor router, and here we get into the phones. So first offer is a Google Pixel 3 with Lineage OS for about $400. That's not great, not bad. Getting a Pixel 3 in very good condition with whatever used stuff comes on it by default isn't too hard to do for $250. So he's charging on the order of $150 for this purchase and install service. Next option is a worse condition one, $50 cheaper. Next option is a Pixel 3 XL. So that's a little bit bigger for a little bit more. Pixel 3 XLs cost a little bit more on the used market. Pixel 4 is his latest offering, and he's charging $630 for one of those. You actually can get Pixel 4s a little bit cheaper than this, I think. A little bit cheaper than what would be $150, less than $630. You can get them for less than $400. So he's charging over $200 for the purchase and install service on the Pixel 4, but maybe getting Pixel 4 devices that are unlocked is more difficult than I expect. Pixel 4 XL, then we get into, he has 64 and 128 meg versions of the Pixel 4 XL, Moto G7, OnePlus 6, Moto G7 Plus, and then he offers the service of installing a custom ROM on a device that you ship him on basically the list of phones that he's offering, although he's willing to do a Pixel 3a install. He doesn't actually offer Pixel 3as. That's sort of sad because Pixel 3as have a headphone jack on them, which is a feature that's pretty useful on a phone. But that's sort of the story here. So looking at these options, the one that I'm going to give a try to is the one that was there at the top of the list, that Google Pixel 3. And the reason for that is because he claims that you can get this to work with Verizon, which would be convenient for me at the moment. So let's go ahead and order one of these and see what we get. Here's the package I got from Rob Braxman. It should contain a Google Pixel 3 with Lineage OS installed. So first packaging, Shakes a little bit, that's not great, but hopefully the phone itself is packed pretty well in here. Let's go ahead and crack this open. Trying not to actually break it before we get into it, but cracking it open. It's one of these fun US Priority Mail packages. Alright, so inside we have a charger. Hello, airplane. In any case, we have a charger. We have a USB-C cable. I don't know if I believe that these are the original charger and USB-C cable, but that's fine. And then here's the phone nicely wrapped in bubble wrap. We open it up, we have a phone in reasonably good condition. Oh, I got white back. I didn't expect white back. That's okay. Probably also get a case on this thing. But there we go. We have a phone, and it seems to have been packed well enough. Since unpacking, I've booted up this phone and connected it to my Wi-Fi. I've also set it up with an app called ScreenStream, which is open source off the F-Droid store, so that we can record the screen pretty easily. It's streamed to my desktop computer. We can see that the phone display here is the same as what we're seeing over on the right-hand side of the screen. Now, if we look at the About Phone screen, which we can get to under Settings, scroll down to About Phone, we will get device name, BraxOS, that's great. This thing is a Pixel 3, that's what we wanted. And if we scroll all the way down to build number, not actually scrolling down because all this IMEI stuff isn't stuff I necessarily want to share about this phone I got, but we'll see build number is Lineage blue line something something. This is plausibly a version of Lineage OS 17. We can never be sure. Rob Braxman had the ability to install all kinds of random spyware backdoors in this thing when he did the install, but that's the risk of delegating the install to a third party. And trying to get complete supply chain security in a phone is difficult. Possibly impossible, but definitely difficult. So Rob Braxman seems reasonably trustworthy among the various choices for getting something like this installed. The other main alternative is to buy something random off eBay, so at least Rob Braxman has a YouTube channel and an online identity. So with that, let's go ahead and take a quick look at what is pre-installed in this phone. We get default stock Android stuff, like the phone app. We get the messaging app, which is something that you don't actually get by default on most Google Android because they replace it with something like a Hangouts app or whatever it is nowadays. We get the camera app. It's just the default Android camera app. And then we start to see some things that are not necessarily the default on an Android device. For example, DuckDuckGo is set here as the primary search engine. Other stuff that we have in here, most importantly, we have the F-Droid store. Let me see if I can grab that. That's this guy right here. F-Droid is the open source app store for Android and allows us access to open source apps where there's some level of trustworthiness in the apps themselves. People can check to see if there's security issues with the app, make sure it doesn't have any malicious features that we don't necessarily want. Which malicious features we don't want is a matter for some debate, but if it's open source, we can go ahead and check for any malicious features, whatever it is that we don't want. In addition to that, we have the Aurora Store here. Now this thing is a front end to the Google Play Store and allows us to install some apps sometimes. I'll have to test that out in a little while. It hasn't been entirely reliable for me in the past, but it is occasionally useful to be able to install things, especially in cases where there's some specific task that depends on an App Store mobile app. Online banking is the easy example, but some things like conferences will provide an app that's the only way to get the schedule. So for those sort of things, having access to the Google Play Store, even if only for free apps, even if only unreliably, is useful. Other stuff that we have in here includes conversations. This is a XMPP chat client, that should be the standard chat protocol. There is no standard chat protocol. Everybody's off on Telegram or Facebook Messenger or some random thing. But XMPP is the formal standard for chat protocols. So being able to set up an XMPP server or connect to one is useful. We have K9 Mail is our mail client. Having a real mail client is really nice. Open Keychain gives us the ability to sign and verify PGP signatures and do PGP encryption. We have OSMand. This is an open source mapping and navigation program. We have Orbot. That's a Tor client, so we can anonymously access things on the web. Where was OpenVPN? It's here somewhere. There's an OpenVPN client on this thing. Oh, it's right in the middle. This allows us to connect to a sort of standard VPN. VPNs have some interesting properties. The idea of a commercial VPN to protect your privacy is questionable, but the more traditional use of connecting to a business VPN or a personal private VPN is extremely useful, and so having that pre-installed is helpful. And then we have this thing called Netguard. Now, I haven't played with Netguard much, but it claims to be able to do individual app network blocking, which is a feature that isn't terrible. That might be useful, although figuring out how effective that is would take some analysis. So that's the sort of reasonable defaults that we have in here. There's some other things that are worth mentioning that aren't as sort of obviously useful. First one here is this Braxme app. Rob Braxman has written his own social network called Braxme, and he has it pre-installed on the phone. I guess that's fair. We also have MicroG. Now, what MicroG is it's an alternate implementation of some of the Google Play Services APIs. And this means that with MicroG installed and enabled, this phone is going to connect to the Google servers. Now, if we really want privacy, and we want privacy from Google surveillance, then the only way to do that is to not connect to Google at all. If we're connecting to Google, they're getting information about those connections, and as I may talk about more later, any connection to them is some information that potentially can be used to reduce your privacy and your control over your computing. So MicroG is a trade-off. There's some benefits. It makes it possible for apps to do push notifications, which otherwise is very difficult on Android. But that is a trade-off. MicroG also allows you to log into a Google account, and if you're looking for the sort of privacy that a Google free phone is going to provide you, then you certainly don't want to be logging in to your Google account from the Android operating system. That is a terrible idea. So that's a button not to press that's provided by default on this phone. Last thing here is Waze. Now, Rob Braxman has said repeatedly that he thinks that Waze is safer than Google Maps. And maybe very marginally that's true, but Waze is owned by Google, and all of the information that Google can collect for Google Maps, they also have the ability to collect for Waze. It's not an open source program. It has your location. Therefore, it can collect your location. That's how that works. So Waze is sort of sketchy, but if you don't use it, it can't cause too much of a problem because of the way Android security works. One of the big advantages of Android compared to most desktop operating systems is that we do have inter-app isolation. So the main thing that we've accomplished with a Degoogled phone is making it so that except for the minor disadvantages here with MicroG, we've made it so that the operating system itself isn't working against us from a privacy perspective. The operating system just exists locally on this phone, shouldn't be connecting to anyone, and therefore any privacy or autonomy concerns that we have about the software running on this phone is from apps. The apps are isolated, and so those risks are limited as much as is reasonable without going to some solution that's more extreme than a an Android device at all. And I may talk about that more in the future as well. So overall, this phone looks pretty good. It's a Google Pixel 3 pre-installed with Lineage OS and no Google apps by Rob Braxman. It came, now that I've inspected it in some more detail, it came in basically mint condition. There's no scratches that I can find on it. So it's a as new phone. It does in fact come with Lineage OS pre-installed as far as I can tell. And it comes with a plausible set of software pre-installed. There's a couple minor issues. First, microG is pre-installed on this and configured to connect to Google servers. And connecting to Google servers at all is a little bit sketchy. Another issue is that it looks like the F-Droid App Store on it is not set up with root access, which allows it to do automatic updates of the software that you install through the F-Droid store. Now, I can't entirely confirm that very easily because I would have to wait for an update, but I don't see any sign of Magisk, which is the normal way that you would do that. That lets you get root, which is required to set it up, one of the ways you can set it up. So I'm just, until I find out otherwise, I'm going to assume that it's not doing that. I'll have to set that up to make this this phone useful for me, but it might be a feature, especially if you're not used to working with F-Droid apps, to see things as they update a little bit and accept updates manually. So overall, my conclusion on this phone is that Rob Braxman is doing a decent job of pre-installing a custom ROM without Google Apps, and he's doing it at a reasonable price. So if you want a Google-free Android phone so that you can have a mobile phone and have decent privacy and decent digital autonomy, go ahead and give him the $400 or $600 for one of the phones, and you'll get to avoid going through the whole process of installing a custom ROM. Installing a custom ROM isn't too bad, so that's fun to do too, but you have to make sure that you get exactly the right model phone, and that's the big thing that this is avoiding, is having to worry about exactly what phone you're dealing with. All right, thanks a lot for watching the video, and you probably do want to consider moving to a smartphone that doesn't spy on you quite as much.